IHS, advancing decisions that advance the world.
What we can see right now is really an emerging tension between, on the one hand, NATO's definition of cybersecurity and the United States is on the other hand. The United States has been pushing in the military and in the government to categorize cyber warfare as the fifth domain of warfare, alongside traditional elements of land, sea, air, and space. In fact, the recent Department of Defense cybersecurity defense policy that just came out in July 2011, it formalizes this process. On the other hand, what we have is a NATO security policy, most recently passed and endorsed by defense ministers in June 2011. And that document recognizes that cyber warfare underpins the traditional four elements of the four domains of cyber warfare, but it doesn't recognize it as a new domain in and of itself. So this is really a tension that the two governments, or I guess national organizations, international organizations, need to resolve if they're hoping to align their cybersecurity processes and procedures in the future. There are a number of important differences in NATO's cybersecurity policy, I think actually that go beyond even just previous elements or previous iterations of its cyber policy, actually challenge these sort of fundamental assumptions of the NATO alliance itself. The most important thing really is that NATO is nowadays looking to protect its own networks. The cyber warfare doctrine that came out in June 2011 really focuses on protecting NATO-owned infrastructure. So in this sense, extending the cyber umbrella that NATO operates to its agencies, to its regional headquarters, as well to some degree to non-NATO owned infrastructure that is critical to core NATO tasks. So in this sense, we're looking at, for instance, Central Asian air bases that support the air bridge efforts to and from Afghanistan. However, the NATO policy has been very specific in excluding civilian critical national infrastructure. So we're talking about banks, power, energy, excluding those elements from the NATO cybersecurity umbrella. And this, I think, is an important change in the way NATO has been dealing with security threats. If we put a little historical perspective into it, in the Cold War, Russian bombers would be turned back regardless of whether they were going to target military infrastructure or civilian infrastructure in Europe. However, nowadays, in the cybersecurity environment, if NATO detects an attack, it's going to protect itself. It's looking at self-defense, and it's going to effectively leave critical national infrastructure, a civilian environment, to fend for itself. Considering NATO was founded on principles of collective defense and of mutual defense, focusing on self-defense in the cybersecurity environment is something that is quite new and potentially challenges the relationships that the member states agreed to when they joined NATO. So I think it's something that NATO needs to explore a little bit more and explain before they formalize that definition. Current policy really leaves critical national infrastructure out in the dark, really. But I think it's important to recognize that NATO is protecting its command and control responsibilities and its command and control response capabilities, which enables it to respond to any potential aggression on the alliance or on the member states in general. The idea here is to deter would-be hackers from launching an attack by indicating that NATO will always have the capability to bounce something back down the wire, as it would be. This is effectively, I think, although NATO planners would be hesitant to call it such, it would be really considered cyber deterrence. And that has obvious parallels with the sort of historical elements of nuclear deterrence, where you didn't want to be the one attacking because you knew that you could never protect against a retaliatory strike from another nuclear power. As mentioned, this is really something that NATO planners are a bit hesitant to get into because they don't like the parallels, but I think it's a sort of natural extension of the concept of deterrence into the 21st century. The question then really for NATO is how to define when it is appropriate to launch the second strike capability, where to draw its red lines, and particularly how to do so amidst sort of the daily attacks that are ongoing against its own military infrastructures and that of its member nations. So it's a very difficult moment for NATO at this point.
IHS, advancing decisions that advance the world.